In the dusty village of Oma, where morning dew clung to the earth like desperate hope, lived a widow named Mama Ebuka and her 3 children. Her youngest, Ebuka, was only 15, a thin boy with restless eyes and a mouth quick with defiance. Life hadn't been kind to Mama Ebuka since her husband's death. She tilled the soil from dawn to dusk, barely managing to feed her children with what the earth offered. Their compound was a humble mud hut that smelled of smoke and dreams long buried. Ebuka, unlike his elder siblings, had a wild streak. He was the type to climb mango trees when told not to sneak off during chores, and to argue with elders even when he knew he was wrong. But he wasn't evil, just misunderstood. Unfortunately, whenever a chicken went missing or a neighbor's yam disappeared, the whispers always found their way to Mama Ebuka's doorstep. "Not that Ebuka again," they would say, shaking their heads, and sometimes it was true. He had taken things, not out of wickedness, but out of hunger and curiosity. But lately, he has changed. His elder brother, Chaik, had warned him that the village was running out of patience. The Council of Elders had passed a new law: no more thieves would go unpunished. Anyone caught stealing would be humiliated publicly. They would parade the village with the stolen item hung on their neck like a cursed necklace. For a while, peace returned. Chickens stayed in coops, and yams stayed in barns. But behind that quiet, something dark brewed. Mama Ebuka's co-wife, Mama Duru, who lived in the next compound, had always harbored bitterness toward her and jealousy, perhaps because Ebuka was intelligent, or maybe because in her heart, she feared Mama Ebuka's children would rise above hers. Then came the morning that would change everything. Mama Ebuka had gone early to the farm, her hoe and basket balanced on her head. The sun had barely kissed the sky when Mama Duru stormed into the village square, her wrapper flapping angrily as she marched to the village security. "My chicken laid 6 eggs yesterday," she shouted. "Today, I found only 4. And I know who took them. It is Ebuka, I swear by the gods." The guards didn't wait. They stormed Mama Ebuka's compound. Ebuka was alone, doing nothing as usual. He didn't run when he saw them. He stood his ground. "I didn't take anything." He protested, but words meant nothing. They dragged him through the village. Some neighbors watched with pity, others with cold satisfaction. Under the tree where judgments were once passed, they beat him: sticks, belts, fists. Still, he cried, "I didn't do it. Confess." They screamed, "I swear, I did not steal any egg." But their fury needed blood. Someone shouted, "Blind him. Let him never see to steal again." And so, while the sun climbed higher, Ebuka's cries echoed through Oma as they gouged out his eyes, 2 orbs of innocent darkness ripped from a boy too poor to be believed. Then they dumped him near the path that led to the farm, where no one would hear him scream again. The night fell over Oma with a silence too loud to ignore. Mama Ebuka returned from the farm late that evening, her body aching from hours under the scorching sun. Her wrapper was soaked in sweat, her feet cracked with dust, but her mind only yearned for one thing: rest. As she approached her compound, something felt off. The air was too still, the goats too quiet. And then she noticed Ebuka was not outside waiting for her like he always did. "Chaik. Ngozi." She called into the darkening hut. Her 2 older children stepped out, both looking uneasy. "Where is Ebuka?" she asked, frowning. "We haven't seen him since morning," Chaik replied. "He was here, sweeping the front yard when you left. But later, someone said he was dragged away by the village security." Mama Ebuka's heart dropped like a stone in a well. "What do you mean, dragged away?" she demanded. Ngozi, her daughter, began to cry. Mama Duru told the guards that Ebuka stole her eggs. Mama Ebuka's knees buckled, and she fell to the ground. The same woman who had shared her husband's compound, the same woman who once suckled her own child beside hers, had accused her son. She scrambled up and rushed to the village square. But by then, the crowd had dispersed, and the security guards had vanished. Nobody would speak to her. The silence of complicity had wrapped itself around the village like a serpent. That night, sleep did not come. She sat outside, rocking back and forth, whispering his name into the wind. Ebuka. Ebuka, my son. Answer me. When dawn broke, Mama Ebuka did not wait. With her hoe in one hand and her heart clutched in the other, she set off to the farm path, praying against every instinct that maybe, just maybe, her son had escaped and gone to hide somewhere. The path was long and winding, shaded by overgrown trees that whispered secrets too terrible for words. Then she heard it, a faint sound, a groan, a dying whisper, "Mama. Mama." She dropped her tools and ran. And there, beneath a cashew tree, she saw him, her boy, barely breathing, lying in a pool of dried blood, with empty sockets where his bright eyes used to be. Flies buzzed around his wounds. His body trembled like a dying flame. She screamed, a sound that pierced the heavens. She knelt and cradled him in her arms, rocking him like he was a baby again. "Mama." His voice was weak. "I didn't do it. I swear. I didn't touch her eggs. They did this to me. Because we have no one. Because we are poor." Mama Ebuka wept, stroking his blood-matted hair. "My son, I know. I know. It was Mama Duru." She told them. And they believed her. I told them the truth. But no one listened. Then his tone changed. His lips quivered with anger, his voice barely a whisper. "Mama. I will come back for all of them. Every single one." Mama Ebuka nodded through her tears, her voice cold. "Spare no one, my son. Spare no one." With one final breath, Ebuka sighed. His body relaxed. His hand slipped from hers, and he was gone. That day, the sky darkened before noon. Clouds gathered like mourners, and thunder roared across the hills. The villagers heard the wail of a mother betrayed not just by a co-wife, but by a community. And in the weeks that followed, they would learn, a dead boy's tears do not dry in the soil, they become rivers of wrath. 3 moons passed since the death of Ebuka, and Oma was never the same again. The village had returned to its usual rhythm. Farmers rose with the cock's crow, children fetched water from the stream. Women pounded yam under the shade of mango trees. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. A strange chill now lingered in the early morning air, and those who had hands in Ebuka's murder began to toss and turn in their sleep. Mama Duru, the co-wife whose accusation triggered the tragedy, was the first to notice. Her compound, once lively and full of children's laughter, grew silent. Her eldest son, James, a promising young man working in Lagos, called home less frequently. Then, one Friday morning, the news came like a knife in the chest. James had died in a ghastly motor accident along the Benin Expressway. His body was found crushed beneath an overturned bus, his eyes wide open. As though he had seen something just before impact, they said the bus swerved for no reason, as if the driver had seen a ghost. Mama Duru wailed and tore her wrapper, rolling in the dust and screaming the boy's name. But the villagers were watching now, whispering behind her back, was it not her mouth that put Ebuka in the ground? They asked. Soon after the funeral, her husband fell sick. Not with fever or cough, but with something darker, an affliction no healer could name. He would scream in the night, clutching his chest, eyes bulging like he was being choked by invisible hands. When the herbalist from the next village came to consult, he shook his head slowly and said, "This is not ordinary sickness. He is being followed." Mama Duru grew thin and paranoid. She no longer greeted people. Her once proud shoulders now hunched like she carried a boulder. Then, one day as she fetched water from the stream, her world went black. Literally. Her sight vanished in an instant. She dropped her calabash and screamed for help, stumbling like a mad woman through the bush. I can't see. I can't see. She cried. She was led back to her compound, blind and trembling, her eyes as empty as Ebuka's had been. Mama Duru, an old woman whispered, "Do you remember what you said that day? You said you were sure it was Ebuka." No one dared speak louder, as if the blindness wasn't enough. A week later, she was struck by a violent stroke. Her mouth twisted to one side, and she could no longer speak. They laid her on a raffia mat, her body half dead, her mind trapped in regret. And then, just like that, she died, but Ebuka's revenge had only just begun. The village security guards, 6 in number, who had dragged him like a goat to slaughter, began to experience nightmares. One by one, they dreamt of Ebuka. In their dreams, he stood barefoot, eyes hollow, his mouth dripping blood. He said nothing, only stared. When they woke, they would find bruises on their bodies, as if beaten by invisible canes. One guard, Amodi, tried to run away to another village, but he collapsed on the footpath and died with his tongue sticking out. Another guard's daughter screamed in the night and died by morning, her small face twisted in terror. The villagers grew restless. The whispers turned to fear. They now avoided Mama Ebuka's compound, crossing the road whenever they passed. The children no longer played near the bush path. Even the chickens no longer laid eggs near that accursed corner. The gods had been disturbed, and yet, Ebuka's spirit would not rest. The elders summoned a meeting at the village square. Grey-haired men in red caps sat under the iroko tree, their walking sticks shaking in their hands. "This boy's spirit is angry," said Chief Odelai. "And rightly so." "But what can we do?" asked another. "He is dead." "No," the oldest of them whispered. "He is not dead. Not truly. His soul waits for justice." That evening, they lit a sacred fire and sent word to Mama Ebuka. When the messenger from the Council of Elders arrived at Mama Ebuka's compound, she was seated outside on a wooden stool, peeling bitter leaf under the fading sun. Her face, hardened by grief and wear, showed no surprise when the young man bowed before her. "Mama, the elders say you should come. They want to speak with you." She said nothing for a long moment. Then, wiping her hands on her wrapper, she stood up. Her silence was heavier than words. The whole village knew what this invitation meant. Something had broken, and only she could fix it. At the village square, the fire had already been lit. Its orange glow flickered against the old faces of the elders, casting long shadows on the ground. The villagers gathered in silence, watching as Mama Ebuka approached, head held high, feet steady. She stood before the council, her back straight like the cassava sticks she carried to the farm. "Mama Ebuka," Chief Odelai began, his voice grave, "we have called you here not in judgment, but in humility. The land is crying. People are dying. Your son's spirit is restless, and his wrath is sweeping through Oma like a harmattan fire." Mama Ebuka raised her chin. "Why didn't the guards wait until I returned from the farm? Didn't Ebuka say he was not the thief?" There was silence. She turned to the villagers. "And you? You all watched as they blinded my child." Not one person stood up for him. Not one of you said, "Let us wait for his mother." You threw away his life because we are poor, because we are alone. A mama rippled through the crowd. "We are sorry," the chief said. "We know sorry cannot return your son, but we ask that you speak to his spirit. Tell him to rest. Too much blood has been shed. The land itself rejects the peace we once knew." Mama Ebuka closed her eyes. She thought of Ebuka's last breath, his voice quivering as he whispered vengeance. She thought of the look in his lifeless face, part pain, part promise. "What does the land offer for my son's pain?" She asked coldly. The elders looked at one another. "We will cleanse his grave. We will offer sacrifices. A goat, a cow, and yams. We will build a shrine in his name so his spirit can be honored." But Mama Ebuka shook her head. "He does not want goats. He wants justice." Then a deep voice rose from the back of the crowd. It was the village priest, Obins, a tall man with a long white beard and eyes that had seen too much. He stepped forward and addressed the gathering. "There is only one way to appease the soul of the wronged," he said. "The blood of those who did wrong has already been taken. But the soul must now be welcomed back to the land, not as a demon, but as a protector." He looked at Mama Ebuka. "You must speak to him. Tonight. At the place where he died." The crowd shivered, and so, that night, Mama Ebuka went alone to the path by the farm, the place where her son took his last breath. She wore a white wrapper and carried palm oil, kola nut, and a calabash filled with water. She knelt. "Ebuka," she whispered. "My son. It is enough." The wind blew, rustling the leaves. "You did not deserve what they did to you. But the land has heard your voice. Let your spirit rest. Leave the living to the gods." Suddenly, the trees around her stilled. The night grew calm. In that moment, Mama Ebuka felt something shift, like a great burden being lifted into the sky. She poured the water on the ground. "Sleep now, my son. I have carried your pain. Now let the earth carry you." And with that, the earth sighed. A week passed after Mama Ebuka's midnight prayer, and the village of Oma began to breathe again. The wind no longer howled at night, and the chickens had returned to their usual roost. But the people had not forgotten. The fear that Ebuka's spirit had carved into their hearts remained, a reminder that injustice, once planted, would always grow roots. It was the village priest, Obins, who reminded the elders that a soul like Ebuka's, once disturbed, could never truly rest unless honored. "He must be remembered," Obins declared, standing before the council. "Not with silence, but with a shrine." And so it was agreed. The villagers gathered at the very spot where Ebuka died, beneath the old cashew tree, where the earth still held the stain of his blood. The same tree where Mama Ebuka had found him broken and bleeding. The clearing was cleansed with herbs and salt water. Young men were sent to cut bamboo and palm fronds. Old women sang dirges as they mixed red earth to mold the small sacred structure. At the heart of the shrine was a carved wooden figure, simple but strong, representing a young boy standing tall with his eyes closed in peace. Around the statue were placed items Ebuka had loved: a small catapult, a slingshot, and a rusted spoon he once used to eat from his mother's pot. His favorite wrapper, the one he tied around his waist whenever he went to fetch firewood, was folded beside the statue like an offering. Mama Ebuka stood quietly, dressed in white. Her face was unreadable. She had cried all the tears her eyes could produce. Now, only strength remained. As the villagers sang, she stepped forward with a bowl of palm oil and poured it at the foot of the statue. "This is not just for my son," she said in a steady voice, "but for every child this village has failed." There was silence. Then, one by one, the villagers came forward, first the elders, then the youth, even the children. Each brought a small item to lay before the shrine. Some brought food, others brought drawings, and a few simply placed their hands on the ground in apology. It became clear that the shrine was not just for Ebuka. It was for their own cleansing. In the days that followed, something strange and beautiful happened. Children who had once played recklessly now spoke with more kindness. The elders began to listen more attentively when the poor among them spoke. People began looking out for one another again. The path where Ebuka died became a sacred space. No one dared to pass it without bowing their head, and the dead stopped. No more dreams of hollow-eyed spirits. No more strange accidents. No more visits from vengeance. Mama Duru's compound, once cursed with death and disease, was abandoned. Grass grew over the doorway, and silence reclaimed the house, as the moon waxed full over Oma. The people finally knew peace. The shrine beneath the cashew tree stood tall, not a monument of fear, but of memory, of justice, and of truth. One evening, Mama Ebuka returned to the shrine alone. She knelt before the statue and placed her hand over her heart. "I kept my promise," my son," she whispered. And they kept theirs. As she turned to leave, a soft wind passed through the cashew branches. The leaves rustled, and for a brief moment, she thought she heard it, a young boy's laughter, light and free, dancing through the trees. Years later, the people of Oma still spoke of the boy who was blinded over a missing egg. His name was Ebuka, but the story had grown larger than the boy. His tale became a legend, passed from mouth to mouth, from fireside to classroom, from grandmother to grandchild. The shrine beneath the cashew tree stood quietly, covered now in soft green moss and surrounded by offerings, palm oil, fresh kola nuts, flowers, and sometimes even handwritten notes from children who had been wronged. Every year, on the day of Ebuka's death, the village observed a day of silence. No farming, no markets, no loud laughter. Just quiet reflection. The shrine keeper, an old man named Uche, would gather the youth and sit them around the sacred spot to tell the story again. But he never softened the edges. Ebuka was not a perfect boy, he would begin. He was stubborn. Sometimes he lied. But on that day, he was innocent. And the children would listen wide-eyed, gasping when he spoke of the eyes being plucked, crying when Mama Ebuka found her son dying under the cashew tree, and shivering when they heard of how the spirits of the guilty were hunted down one by one. One boy once asked, why didn't the gods stop them before they hurt him? Uche looked up at the cashew tree, sighed, and said, because sometimes, it is not the gods who must act first, it is us. The villagers. The mothers. The fathers. The elders. We failed Ebuka before the gods could intervene. That, perhaps, was the real tragedy, but while the tale warned against injustice, it also healed. Mama Ebuka, though aged and grey, had become something of a mother to the entire village. People now came to her for advice, for blessings, for wisdom. She had no riches, but her words carried more weight than gold. They called her Enenimuo, Mother of the Spirit. One day, a delegation from a nearby town came to visit Oma. They had heard whispers of the story and wanted to see the shrine. Among them was a young girl, barely 13, who knelt before the statue and wept. When asked why, she said softly, because my brother was also accused of stealing. They beat him until he ran away. We haven't seen him since. Mama Ebuka walked up to the girl and embraced her. Then this shrine is for him too. That was the moment Oma's people understood. The shrine wasn't just about Ebuka anymore. It had become a sanctuary for every child, every soul wronged, every forgotten voice across the land. And as for the egg, the one that never existed, the one that triggered all the sorrow, it remained a symbol. In some households, people no longer allowed eggs to be eaten on the anniversary of Ebuka's death. We cannot forget what an egg cost us, they'd say. One egg blinded the eyes of justice. But it also opened the eyes of a village. Ebuka's name was now spoken with honor, not as a thief, not as a troublemaker, but as the boy who forced a village to see, and so the story lives on, the egg that blinded the village, not just as a tale of vengeance, but as a warning, that silence is deadly, that justice delayed is blood spilled, and that every child deserves to be heard, even the stubborn ones, even the poor ones, even the ones like Ebuka.